Hello, I'm Terry Cross, and I've been asked to share some suggestions for books for ministers and those interested in theology, ministry. So I've pulled a few off my shelf, so this will be like the off-the-shelf kind of discussion. The first one is by Ray Anderson, teacher at Fuller Theological Seminary. Ray Anderson has written a book called The Shape of Practical Theology, Empowering Ministry with Theological Praxis. The reason I like the book is because it approaches ministry from a theological perspective. Part of why I think a ministry can become stagnant or stale is because we don't realize well enough the foundational aspects of our faith and our ministry in theology. Anderson has a way of writing about this that has one foot in the field of theology and one foot in the field of ministry. And he has been for several decades doing that very thing. And this is at Fuller Seminary, training people in that way. And this is a book that kind of highlights some of his understanding over the years. There are some really fine chapters that pull out what it means to be a Christian who is ministering with some theological depth. Another one that he put together a number of years ago, this is one he edited. It's called Theological Foundations for Ministry. And it pulls together, in fact, the first one is probably in print, this one may not be, but you might find it somewhere. This pulls together the writings of various theologians in the last century and a half. So you'll have their thoughts about ministry. So Karl Barth, Helmut Thielicke, T.F. Torrance, Ray Anderson writes a couple of things in here as well. Hans Küng, who is a German theologian, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and a few others along the way, James Torrance as well. This is perhaps one of the most important books I've read because it gives a real spanning bridge for why theological reflection is important for ministry. So there's a second book. The third one is just downright fun. Well, I consider it fun. I suppose some folks might not consider it fun because it's not a comedy, it's not a novel. It's Thinking in Tongues, Pentecostal Contributions to Christian Philosophy. Okay, the title itself should catch you, Thinking in Tongues. This is written by a philosopher, James K.A. Smith. He goes, I know him by Jamie. He's a wonderful man, and known him from in the Society for Pentecostal Studies for a number of years. He trained as a philosopher at Villanova University. He is one of the foremost philosophers of religion in the United States, and a committed Christian, has a Assemblies of God background, and is teaching at Calvin College right now. I would say about anything he writes you should get your hands on. But this is one that in particular expands the concept of tongues into areas that are just a whole lot more than thinking about the experience of baptism in the Spirit or speaking in tongues in the congregation for interpretation. This is a unique and I think a watershed book because some of what he is going to do is take the Pentecostal idea of thinking or speaking in tongues and ask, does that have any implication for the way we frame the world? Think about the worldview. Does our experience with God help us to shape how we see the world? It's a wonderful book. You can see why I'm saying it's fun. The fourth one is Ministry in the Image of God by David Seamands. Stephen Seamands. David is a relative of his. Stephen Seamands has taught at Asbury. This one has a subtitle of The Trinitarian Shape of Christian Service, and once again, It asks questions, and in a very brief, brief amount of time, it gives several chapters that focus attention on how belief in the Trinity influences the way we look at ministry. So he poses 8 chapters based on aspects that he has seen revealed in Scripture about the Trinity. And that theological and practical mix is just outstanding. The final one for today is this one by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. It's a really wonderful read. Most people know his book, The Cost of Discipleship or Discipleship, and his life story has been made a little bit more public by Eric Metaxas' book. But this book is one he wrote. It's got 2 books as part of it. Life Together is the first one, and the second part of it is Prayer Book of the Bible. This is from his collected work series, so they all have this kind of appearance in them. And this is a rather narrow and small book, but this was written originally when he had to go in hiding, and they shaped a seminary together, and they decided that the students and faculty in this hiding situation, for those who did not follow the Nazis in the regular state church, those in the hiding situation needed some kind of rationale theology for how we could live together. What came out of it is this series of thoughts and the lectures that he shared with his students that have become a classic in Christian literature because it sets the stage for how one might consider forming something like a Christian community together. I think it gives a perfect basis for how to live together as a church. And things to consider and think about in that regard. So that's the last of my 5 list for today. Hopefully you'll get some enjoyment out of them too.